$400,000. That was the price of my dignity that sunny morning at the port of Miami. There, among enormous cruise ships and the smell of salt water, my own son returned me like someone returning a defective product in front of 200 people to impress his father-in-law. My name is Frank Baptist. I'm 73 years old, and I worked my whole life as a customs broker here in Miami, Florida. I know every corner of this port like the palm of my hand. For over 5 decades, I've handled cargo clearance, ship documentation, and all kinds of bureaucracy that maritime commerce requires. I retired a little over 10 years ago, but I still keep some old clients who don't trust anyone else to solve their problems. I made a name for myself in this city. Everyone who works with import and export knows Frank the Broker, as they call me around here. If you're enjoying this story, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Leave in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is when you're watching. Every day there's a new story here on Grandpa's Voice. I'm very happy to be able to share this painful part of my life, even though it's difficult to remember it all. Who knows, maybe my experience will help someone out there, right? I was never a man to spend carelessly. Every cent I earned was hard-earned under the strong Florida sun, running from one place to another with paperwork, dealing with grumpy inspectors and endless bureaucracy. I built my wealth slowly, brick by brick. I raised my son Daniel practically by myself after my wife passed away when he was just 12 years old. I gave him what I never had: education at private school, a business degree, a brand new car when he graduated. When Daniel married Jennifer, almost 20 years ago, I bought the house where they live, well, where they lived until recently. I also started a logistics company for my son to manage, since he had the diploma and I had the contacts. The twins, my grandchildren, were born shortly after. They never lacked anything: private school, international trips, expensive video games, everything that upper-middle-class children are entitled to. That's why what happened that February morning this year, when I had just turned 73, hurt so much. Everything was planned: a luxury cruise, 15 days, with the final destination in Dubai. $400,000 came out of my account to pay for the whole family's trip. A master suite for me, a gift I gave myself after so much work. But fate, or rather ingratitude, had other plans for me that day. What happened at that port changed forever my life and my son's, and also changed my way of seeing people. But I'll tell that properly in a moment, because some stories need to be told slowly, like a poison that enters drop by drop into the blood of someone who betrayed a father's trust. I was born in a small town in Georgia in 1952, the son of Italian immigrants who worked from sunrise to sunset. My father, Antonio Baptist, was a man of few words and calloused hands. My mother, Rose, sewed for others to supplement our income. We were 8 siblings, with me, the 5th in line. From a young age, I learned that nothing in life comes for free. By 10, I was already helping with odd jobs. At 15, I worked as a delivery boy in town. Education only until 4th grade. The rest of my education came from the school of life. At 18, I came to Miami to try my luck. An uncle who worked at the port got me a job as a customs clerk assistant. I remember it like it was yesterday. I arrived with a cardboard suitcase, a patched-up suit that belonged to my older brother, and $50 in my pocket. I slept in a cheap boarding house for the first weeks until I managed to rent a room at the back of a house in Little Havana. At the port, I started doing everything: carrying folders, delivering documents, standing in lines for hours. Gradually, I learned the trade. My broken English improved. I learned the technical terms, memorized laws and regulations. My boss, Mr. Johnson, would say, "Frank, you've got a knack for this." After 5 years as an assistant, I became a junior broker. By 30, I already had my own client portfolio and a small rented office near the port. The work of a customs broker isn't easy, you know. You need to know import and export laws, know how to fill out mountains of documents, have contacts at customs, at the FDA, at the Department of Agriculture. Each merchandise has a classification. Each classification has a different tax. Make a mistake on one code, and the client can lose millions. That's why we earned good money. That's why I earned good money. My routine started at 5 in the morning, black coffee, toast with butter, and straight to the port. First, I'd check the ships that had docked during the night. Then I'd check the status of my clients' containers. I'd spend the day running from one place to another: customs, cargo terminal, shipping offices, banks. I'd return home many times after 8 at night, with my head pounding from thinking about codes, rates, and problems to solve. It was during this hustle that I met Mary, a secretary for one of my clients, an automotive parts importer. Pretty woman, black hair, easy smile. We dated for 6 months and married in a simple ceremony, just with family and close friends. I was 32, she was 28. A year later, Daniel was born, our only child. In the early years, life went smoothly. Work prospered. I managed to buy a small but decent house in Coral Gables, one of the best in Miami. Mary left her job to take care of our boy. I worked double to provide comfort for my family. But happiness didn't last long. When Daniel was 12, Mary was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, one of those aggressive ones. In 6 months, she was gone. It was the worst moment of my life. I found myself alone with a pre-adolescent son to raise. I hired a lady to stay with him while I worked, but the nights were difficult. The boy cried for his mother. I didn't know what to say. I learned to cook, to do laundry, to help with homework. It was a time of tough learning, but it united us. At least I thought so. Over time, the business grew more. I opened my own customs brokerage company, hired employees, set up a bigger office. The money started coming in more consistently. Daniel grew up, finished high school, entered business school. He was an intelligent boy, but always a little spoiled. Maybe because he lost his mother early, maybe because I tried to compensate for that loss by giving him material things. When he graduated, I gave him a brand new BMW. When he met Jennifer, daughter of a real estate businessman, I helped pay for the wedding. Then I bought the house where they went to live, in Brickell, a posh area of Miami. I also opened a logistics company, leveraging my contacts at the port, and put him in charge. Everything prepared, handed to him on a silver platter. Maybe that was my biggest mistake. Jennifer never worked. She lived shopping, attending expensive gyms, and lunching with friends. The twins, Lucas and Laura, were born 3 years after the marriage. Beautiful children, looking just like their mother, enrolled in the most expensive school in Miami, with English lessons, swimming, tennis. I paid for everything without complaining. After all, they were my grandchildren. What I didn't see was that I was creating a monster of ingratitude. The company I opened for Daniel never gave the profit it should have. He didn't have the same knack I had for business. He spent too much, invested too little, hired incompetent friends with high salaries. Even so, he maintained a high standard of living. Imported car, designer clothes, expensive trips. I suspected something wasn't right, but I turned a blind eye. After all, he was my only son. I built my wealth over the years. Besides my 3-bedroom house in Coconut Grove, I have 3 other properties rented out in Miami. A beach house in the Keys for weekends, fixed income investments, some stocks. I was never one to show off, always lived well, but without excess. My only luxury was traveling once a year, usually to Europe or across the United States, always alone, since Daniel and his family never accepted my invitations. "Dad, your trips are too boring," he would say. The first signs that something wasn't right started about 2 years ago. Daniel began to visit me only when he needed money. The calls became rare. At family gatherings, Jennifer barely disguised her boredom. The teenage twins lived glued to their phones and barely paid attention to me. Mr. Arnold, Jennifer's father, started frequenting their home more, an arrogant gentleman who boasted about his real estate deals and was always showing off. What I didn't know and discovered later is that Mr. Arnold's empire was crumbling. Wrong investments, accumulated debts, problems with the IRS, but he maintained appearances, and Daniel and Jennifer idolized him as if he were an example of success. Meanwhile, I, who had actually built solid wealth, was seen as the outdated old man, who didn't know how to enjoy life. It was in this context that at the beginning of this year, I decided to do something special. I turned 73 in January and thought, why not fulfill an old dream? I've always wanted to take a luxury cruise, One of those with everything included, master suite, first-class service. And why not take the whole family? Maybe it would be an opportunity to get close again. I researched and found a perfect itinerary. Miami, Key West, Jamaica, Canary Islands, Barcelona, Marseille, Rome, Athens, Dubai. 15 days of pure luxury. I bought tickets for everyone. Me, Daniel, Jennifer, and the twins. $400,000. A value that for me represented not just money, but the hope of regaining the affection and respect of my family. When I told Daniel about the trip, he feigned enthusiasm. Jennifer smiled sideways, like someone accepting out of obligation. The twins were the only ones who seemed genuinely excited. We set the date, February 15th, 2025. I could hardly wait. I bought new clothes, quality suitcases, read everything about the places we would visit. I didn't imagine that on the day of departure, my dream would turn into the worst nightmare of my life. In the days leading up to the trip, I already felt something strange in the air. Daniel avoided coming by the house. Jennifer was excessively nice on the phone, she who never called me. I even received some messages from the twins asking details about the master suite I had reserved. I thought it was excitement. Poor me, right? A foolish old man who still believed in his family's affection. The week of the trip, Daniel came to dinner with me alone, without Jennifer, without the twins. "Strange, Dad. The father-in-law is very excited about the cruise," he commented as he attacked the steak I had prepared. "What do you mean? The father-in-law is excited, Daniel." He's jealous, you know. Said he always dreamed of taking a cruise like this," continued Daniel without looking me in the eyes. I should have noticed then the way he played with the food on his plate, the elusive look, the excessive attention to his cell phone. Signs that my old age preferred to ignore. The night before embarkation, I slept badly. I dreamed of Mary, my deceased wife. In the dream, she warned me, "Frank, be careful with the port." I woke up sweating at 3 in the morning, a premonition that I ignored. February in Miami is a furnace. On that morning of departure, the sky was of an impeccable blue, the kind that only the Florida coast can produce. I arrived at the port at 9 a.m., 2 hours before boarding. I was anxious like a child on the first day of school. Brand new wheeled suitcase, well-ironed clothes. I even bought a Panama hat to complete the tourist look. Ridiculous, I know now, but at the time I thought it was part of the fun. The ship was imposing, a white giant anchored at Terminal F where transatlantics usually dock. MSC Splendida, an Italian colossus with 18 floors with pools, casino, theater, luxury restaurants. $400,000 well spent, I thought, while admiring that floating city. The boarding line was already considerable. Excited families, elderly couples like me, noisy young people, the typical buzz of those about to fulfill a dream. I stood there alone, waiting for Daniel and his family to arrive. 10 o'clock, 10:30, 11 o'clock. I started to get worried. I called his cell phone, voicemail. It was then that I saw their car arriving at the parking lot, a black Audi that I had helped buy 2 years ago. I sighed with relief, but soon realized something was wrong. There was a 5th passenger in the car, a man with grey hair, Mr. Arnold. He must have come just to say goodbye, I naively thought. I saw everyone getting out of the car. Daniel, Jennifer, the twins, and Mr. Arnold, all with suitcases, including Daniel's father-in-law. My stomach twisted into a knot. They approached. Daniel came in front with that expression I knew well, the same one he made as a child when he broke something at home. "Dad, we need to talk," he said, pulling me to a corner away from the line. "What's wrong?" "We're going to miss boarding," I responded, feeling that something bad was coming. It was then that Daniel dropped the bomb. "Dad, there's been a change of plans." "What do you mean, change of plans? Are we going to board or not?" I asked, feeling my heart accelerate. "We are going, Dad." "But you, look," an unforeseen came up. "What unforeseen, Daniel? Speak up," I demanded, already losing patience. It was when he looked at Mr. Arnold, who was smiling from afar, and then turned back to face me. "Dad, I gave your ticket to Mr. Arnold." The world stopped. I swear it stopped. I spent a good few seconds trying to process that information. "What do you mean, gave my ticket? I paid for everything." Look, Dad, he continued with that voice of someone explaining something obvious to a child. Mr. Arnold has never been on a cruise like this. It's a dream of his life. And you? Well, you've traveled so much you can take another cruise any time, right? I felt the blood boiling in my veins. I looked around. At least 200 people in line, many observing that strange scene. Me, a 73-year-old gentleman, being dismissed by my own son on the day of departure. Daniel, do you have any idea what you're doing? I paid $400,000 for this trip. Dad will reimburse you later, he said, with a disregard that cut me like a knife. Go home now, don't make a scene, okay? Jennifer approached with that fake smile I so detested. Father-in-law, you understand, right? Mr. Arnold has never left the United States. It's a unique opportunity for him. The twins, my own grandchildren, laughed beside her. Grandpa will stay. That childish laugh that once seemed sweet to me sounded like a mockery. Mr. Arnold approached last with that arrogant posture as always. He wore a light suit, completely inappropriate for a cruise, and carried a leather briefcase that looked expensive, but I knew was fake. Thanks for the sweet, Frank. You won't regret this good deed. Good deed? I hadn't done any deed. They were robbing me in broad daylight. I opened my mouth to protest when 2 ship security guards approached. Any problem here? Asked the taller one. None, Daniel quickly responded. My father was just saying goodbye to us. I'm not saying goodbye, I protested. I have a ticket. I paid for it. The security guard looked at Daniel, who shook his head as if to say, poor thing, he's confused. Then he took out the 5 boarding passes from his pocket. My name had been crossed out, and Mr. Arnold's written over it in a crude forgery. Sir, I'm sorry, but without a pass you can't board, said the security guard, gently holding my arm. We'll escort you to the exit. It was the greatest humiliation of my life. 200 people watching as I was escorted out like an intruder, a gatecrasher. Me, Frank Baptist, who had built a respectable life in that city, being treated like a senile and inconvenient old man by my own son. As I walked to the exit, I heard the voice of another security guard. Sir, without a pass, no boarding. The phrase kept hammering in my head like a cruel mantra, but something inside me changed at that moment. It was as if a switch had been flipped. Instead of screaming, of making a scene like any person would do, I turned, looked at Daniel and all that ungrateful family, and smiled. A calm, almost serene smile. It's all right, Daniel. Have a good trip. He was surprised. He expected a fight, expected drama. That smile disconcerted him more than any scream. Dad, don't be upset, he tried without much conviction. I'm not upset, I replied, still smiling. Enjoy the cruise, all of you. And I walked out with my head held high. I didn't shed a single tear while I was at the port. The crying would come later, in the solitude of my house, but at that moment something stronger than hurt was taking hold of me, something cold and calculating that I didn't know existed inside this old heart. Because what Daniel didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I wasn't just a good-natured old man with money in the bank. I was the guarantor of his mortgage. I paid for the whole family's health insurance. I had power of attorney for the company I put in his name, and most importantly, I knew that Mr. Arnold, the one who replaced me on the cruise, was completely bankrupt. Arriving home, I took a bottle of whiskey that I kept for special occasions. It would be a special occasion, yes, not the one I planned, but special nonetheless. I poured a finger of the drink into a crystal glass and sat on the porch, looking at the sea. Far away, I could see the huge ship departing. I raised the glass in a solitary toast. To your health, Daniel, and to your ruin too. I picked up my cell phone. The first call was to the bank that financed Daniel's house. Good afternoon. I'd like to speak with the mortgage manager. I'm Frank Baptist, guarantor of Daniel Baptist's house. After confirming my data and passing security, I explained the situation. I want to cancel my guarantee as guarantor of the house. Mr. Frank, this may cause problems for the mortgage holder, explained the attendant. I know, I replied, feeling a surprising calm. That's exactly the objective. The second call was to the family's health insurance, premium, one of those that covers everything, even experimental treatments abroad. $2,000 per person every month, coming directly out of my account. Good afternoon. I would like to cancel the health insurance for Mr. Daniel Baptist's family. Reason for cancellation, sir. Default, I answered, savoring each syllable. Moral default. The third and final call was to the accountant who took care of the company I opened for Daniel. A power of attorney signed years ago gave me full power to act on his behalf. At the time, it was just a precaution in case something happened to me and he needed to resolve things. Ironic how life comes full circle. Louis, it's Frank Baptist. Oh, Mr. Frank Allgood, weren't you supposed to travel today? There was a change of plans, I replied, repeating the same words Daniel had used with me. I need you to close Daniel's company. Silence on the other end of the line. Close? What do you mean, Mr. Frank? Exactly that. Use the power of attorney I have. Close the company, cancel contracts, fire employees, sell the assets. But does Daniel know about this? He will know, I replied. Soon. The accountant still tried to argue, but I was adamant. In the end, he gave in. It was his job, after all, and I was within my legal right. After the calls, I found myself wondering how long it would take until Daniel discovered what I had done. The ship had just departed. The first stop would be in Key West 24 hours from then. If he checked his cell phone when arriving there, well, it would be quite a shock. But there was one thing that made me even more satisfied, information I had that Daniel completely ignored. Mr. Arnold, the wealthy real estate businessman, Jennifer's father, had been bankrupt for over 3 months. Social Security number blocked at the IRS for accumulated debts. I learned this through a friend who worked at the courthouse and told me by chance, thinking I already knew, since Daniel was married to his daughter. Daniel had traded me for a bankrupt man. Traded the father who gave him everything for a father-in-law who had nothing more to offer besides appearances. I finished my whiskey contemplating the sunset over the Miami Sea, the same sea that now carried my son and his family on a trip that would end very differently than they imagined. The sea this old friend I saw every day for the past 50 years seemed to tell me, be patient, Frank. Justice comes in the waves of time, and I would be patient. Revenge, they say, is a dish best served cold, and I would serve this dish with all the calm that my 73 years granted me. I didn't have to wait long for Daniel's reaction. Exactly 24 hours later, when the ship docked in Key West, my cell phone started ringing non-stop. First text messages, then calls. Then more increasingly desperate messages. I counted 107 missed calls in less than 2 hours. I didn't answer any. Only after leaving him sufficiently distressed did I decide to return one of the calls. I knew he would be using the ship's internet, which is usually very expensive. $50 per minute at least. Each second of this conversation would cost him good money. A small additional satisfaction for me. When I finally answered, his voice was pure panic. Dad, what is this? The bank called me saying they're going to foreclose on the house. Hello, Daniel, enjoying the cruise? I asked, with a tranquility I didn't know I possessed. Dad, explain this to me. The health insurance cancelled. The accountant saying the company was closed. What did you do? Nothing much, I just changed plans, just like you did yesterday. But the house is in my name. That's true. But I'm the guarantor, remember. Without me as security, the bank forecloses on the property. Simple as that. I heard his breathing accelerating on the other end. I could almost see his face red with anger and fear. Dad, you can't do this. We have the twins, Jennifer. The same Jennifer who laughed at me at the port. The same twins who thought it was funny to see me being thrown out in front of 200 people. He fell silent for a few seconds, then tried another approach. Dad, it was a mistake, I admit. We just wanted to please Mr. Arnold. Daniel, I interrupted, there's one more thing you should know. What? He asked, his voice already trembling. Your father-in-law, the man for whom you traded me, he's broke, completely bankrupt. Lie, he shouted. Call the IRS and ask. His Social Security is blocked for 3 months due to debts. He doesn't have a penny to his name, Daniel, and you gave my $400,000 ticket to him. Absolute silence on the other end. Just the sound of his heavy breathing. Don't believe it? Ask him about the 3 real estate developments that failed last year. Ask about the tax foreclosure process he's facing. How? How do you know all this? Daniel's voice now was no more than a whisper. Miami is a small city for someone who's lived here for 50 years, son. People talk, and I listen. A few more seconds of silence. Then I heard Jennifer's voice in the background, asking what was happening. The muffled sound of Daniel telling her about her bankrupt father. A sharp scream, a door slamming. Dad, Jennifer went crazy. She's saying I ruined her life, that I traded a rich father-in-law for a poor one. Ironic, isn't it? I commented, without being able to hide some satisfaction. You traded me for your father-in-law thinking he was rich. Now you discover that you traded the rich for the poor. Life has these twists. Dad, for God's sake, undo all of this. We're in the middle of the ocean. As I said, you'll find that there are things that once done can't be undone. Abandoning a father is one of them. I heard more screams in the background. It seemed that Jennifer was having a nervous breakdown. Daniel covered the phone for a moment, then came back. Dad, the captain sent security here. Jennifer broke half the cabin. They're saying we're going to be thrown off the ship. Thrown off? How does it feel to be thrown off, Daniel? Must be humiliating. No, Dad, help me. Help how? I'm at home, remember? You left me here. At this moment, I decided to give one more stab. Daniel, there's one more thing about the company I closed. Yes? His voice was pure desperation. There was a $200,000 debt that you hid. How do you know? The accountant told me everything. Seems like you were taking out loans without telling me. Now it's your problem. But the company was yours. It was in your name, son, I'm sorry. More screams in the background. The connection became unstable. I heard parts of a heated discussion, something about an inadmissible confusion and breach of passengers' code of conduct. The last thing I heard before the call dropped was Daniel begging someone not to do something. Then, silence. In the following days, I found out, through contacts at the port, that there had been a serious fight on board. The ship's captain, following strict security protocols, decided to disembark Daniel and his family at the next stop, Key West. Apparently, Jennifer had assaulted a flight attendant when she tried to calm her down. And as if fate wanted to add one more element to the tragedy, Mr. Arnold, the father-in-law for whom I was exchanged, suffered a heart attack on the ship. It wasn't fatal, but required immediate hospitalization in Key West. Without health insurance, since I had cancelled his too, Daniel had to pay $30,000 in hospital expenses in cash. My contacts informed me that they returned from Key West to Miami by regular bus, one of those that stops at every little town along the way. 12 hours of travel with 2 irritated teenage children, a furious wife and a convalescent father-in-law. I must admit that I felt a twinge of pity, but it lasted less than a sigh. When they arrived home the next morning, they found a process server waiting at the door of the building. Eviction order, 30 days. It was on this day that Daniel appeared at my door. Deep, dark circles, unshaven, wrinkled clothes. He seemed to have aged 10 years in 3 days. Dad, for God's sake. Daniel, I replied, keeping the door ajar. How can I help you? You know very well. The bank, the house, the company. We're on the street. You traded me for $400,000, Daniel. It was to please Jennifer. She insisted so much. She said she needed to impress her father. And you thought the best way to impress your father-in-law was to humiliate your father in front of 200 people. Forgive me, he shouted, falling to his knees at my door. A scene that in other times would have broken my heart. But not now, not after what he did. No, Daniel. Let your father-in-law forgive you. And I closed the door. Simple as that, like closing a chapter of a book that's no longer worth reading. Daniel's total bankruptcy occurred in the following weeks. Without my guarantee as guarantor, the bank executed the mortgage and repossessed the house. The officially closed company left several debts outstanding, all in his name. His name went to credit bureaus and all kinds of defaulters lists that exist. The marriage, already shaken by the cruise episode, collapsed when Jennifer discovered the full extent of the financial disaster. Not only was her father broke, but now her husband was too. To top it off, the rich father-in-law, who could save them, had cut relations completely. 1 month after the fateful day at the port, Daniel was begging for a job around the city, but Miami is small, news travels fast. The story of the son who traded his father for his father-in-law on the cruise had gone viral. A video recorded by some curious person in the boarding line showed the whole scene. Me being informed I would no longer travel, the security guards escorting me out, Daniel and Jennifer laughing, Mr. Arnold thanking for the suite, 15 million views, angry comments, monster son, father did too little, deserved worse. In a city like Miami, where many families have known each other for generations, that was a social death sentence. Nobody wanted to hire the ungrateful son. 6 months after the incident, I learned that Jennifer had abandoned Daniel. She simply packed her bags and left, leaving the twins behind. I didn't marry to live in misery. Those were her last words, according to neighbors who witnessed the scene. Daniel, Mr. Arnold and the 2 teenagers ended up living together in a shack in Opa-locka in the periphery, the only thing they could afford with the little money they had left. The man who planned to go to Dubai was now without running water and with clandestine electricity. It was when I received the last call from Daniel. "Dad, the kids are going hungry." "Ask Grandpa Arnold," I replied without hesitating. "He has nothing. He's more broke than I am." "So you traded me for nothing, Dad?" The despair in his voice was palpable. "I'm not your father, Daniel. You returned me at the port." And I hung up. It was the last time we spoke. 3 months after the cruise fiasco, I decided I deserved to fulfill my dream. I bought a new ticket, the same ship, the same route, the same master suite, but this time I traveled alone in peace. I posted a photo in the luxury cabin with a glass of champagne in hand, watching the sunset on the maritime horizon. The turquoise blue ocean in the background, the sea breeze slightly messing up my grey hair. The caption simply said, "Life goes on." Daniel commented, "Dad, take me with you." I replied, "I gave you your ticket once. You gave it to your father-in-law." And I blocked his profile. Today I'm 75 years old. It's been 2 years since that fateful morning at the port of Miami. 2 years since I discovered that my own son was capable of trading me for money and status. 2 years of reflection, inner reconstruction, search for peace. Many people ask me if I regret what I did, if I wasn't too hard on Daniel, if I shouldn't have forgiven. After all, he is my son, blood of my blood. The truth is, I don't regret it. I don't regret showing him that actions have consequences, that betraying the trust of someone who gave you everything in life has a high price to pay. They say that with age, one becomes wiser or more bitter. Perhaps I've become a bit of both. Wiser to recognize when I'm being used, more bitter for having to learn that lesson in the worst possible way. I won't lie, the first months were difficult. Even having done justice, the pain of betrayal doesn't disappear like magic. I would wake up in the middle of the night reliving that scene at the port. Jennifer's sarcastic smile, my grandchildren's laughter, Mr. Arnold's arrogance, and mainly Daniel's look, a mix of indifference and irritation, as if I were a nuisance, a problem to be solved. I sought help, you know. At 73, for the first time in my life, I went to a psychologist. Dr. Matthews, a young man who could be my grandson, but with a wisdom that surprised me. It was he who helped me understand that what I felt wasn't just anger or hurt, it was grief. Grief for the son I thought I had, for the relationship I believed was true, for the family I imagined I had built. "Mr. Frank," he told me in one of the sessions, "you didn't lose your son that day at the port. You lost him much earlier, when he chose to value money and appearances above love and respect. What happened was just the confirmation of something that already existed." Hard words, but true, and in a way liberating because they allowed me to move forward without the weight of guilt that they tried to place on my shoulders. In the months following that day, I received several calls and messages from Daniel. At first they were desperate requests for financial help, then threats that I would never see my grandchildren again. Finally, attempts at emotional manipulation. "Dad, I'm sick. Dad, I'm going to kill myself. Dad, the twins are asking about you." I didn't respond to any. Dr. Matthews helped me understand that that was emotional blackmail, not genuine remorse. Daniel wasn't sorry for what he did. He was just suffering the consequences and wanted me to rescue him, as I always did. I learned through acquaintances that he eventually got a job as a janitor at the same port of Miami, where he humiliated me. Irony of fate, isn't it? Every day he cleans the floor where excited tourists pass, boarding cruise ships to destinations that he will only know in photos. The twins, my grandchildren, went to live with their mother after she remarried, a businessman from New York, from what I heard. Jennifer always had a talent for finding men with money. Mr. Arnold ended up returning to his hometown in the countryside, defeated and sick. Daniel was left alone with the weight of his own choices. As for me, well, life went on. At 75 years old, I discovered that I still have a lot to live for, a lot to know, a lot to feel. I resumed old hobbies. I went back to fishing on Sunday mornings on South Point Pier, something I loved to do when I was young. I joined a ballroom dance group for seniors. Who would have thought that this old customs broker has talent for salsa? I made new friends, people who value me for who I am, not for what I have or can give. I travel whenever I can. I've already taken 3 cruises since that fateful day. I've been to the Europe I always dreamed of. I saw the Egyptian pyramids. I contemplated the sunset in Santorini, and in each of these places, I felt a deep gratitude for being alive, for having health, for being able to realize these dreams. Dreams that I built with my own effort, brick by brick, throughout a life of honest work. Sometimes standing on the balcony of my house, looking at the sea I love so much, I think about how unpredictable life is, how the bonds we believe are eternal can break in an instant, how people who should protect us can be precisely those who hurt us most deeply. But I also think about how strong we are, how we can rise again even after the most painful falls, how dignity, this thing so intangible and so precious, can be our greatest wealth when everything else seems lost. I received a letter from Daniel a few weeks ago, the first communication from him in over a year that wasn't a request for money or an attempt at manipulation. A simple letter, handwritten on lined paper, like those we used in my school days. "Dad," the letter said, "I don't know if you'll read this, but I need to say it. I understand now what I did. I don't expect your forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I learned the hardest lesson of my life. Too late, but I learned. Daniel." I didn't respond. Maybe one day I will, maybe not. Some wounds take longer to heal and others never heal completely. What I know is that today I live in peace with myself, not with that naive peace of someone who's never been hurt, but with the mature peace of someone who faced the storm and discovered they were stronger than they thought. If someone asked me what was the greatest lesson I learned in these 75 years of life, I would say it was this: respect isn't bought, it's earned. And when someone treats you as disposable, they're showing who they really are, not who you are. The story I told today doesn't have a happy ending in the traditional sense. There's no emotional reconciliation, teary-eyed hugs, family reunited again in harmony. Real life rarely offers these fairy tale endings, but it has a just ending, an ending in which each one reaps exactly what they sowed. Daniel sowed ingratitude and betrayal. He reaped loneliness and regret. I sowed honest work and dignity. I reaped independence and inner peace. And perhaps that's the true justice of life, not that immediate one which comes like lightning and destroys everything, but the one that comes slowly, like the inevitable and persistent tide, bringing to each the exact reflection of their own actions. In Miami, they now know me as the old man from the port who bankrupted his son at sea. Some look at me with respect, others with fear. I care little. At 75 years old, I'm past the age of worrying about what others think. What matters to me is being able to look in the mirror every morning and recognize the man who stares back at me. A man who worked hard, who loved intensely, who was cruelly betrayed, but who never ever lost his dignity. Daniel learned at the port the most important lesson of his life. A father is not a cruise ticket, not to be exchanged, not to be returned, and when you try to return him, you lose everything, even the port of departure. Now he cleans the floor where he humiliated me every day, remembering, suffering, poetic justice or just justice. Thank you for listening to me so far. If you liked it, leave your like and subscribe to the channel. If you watched until the end, comment down below your opinion about my attitude. And don't forget to check out the other stories here on Grandpa's Voice. On the screen are two that you'll like. A hug from this old man who learned that not every sea is for sailing, but that even in the most turbulent waters, it's possible to keep course when you have principles as a compass.